The night was heavy with silence, and the jungle seemed to hold its breath as the SEAL team moved through the thick brush. Each step measured, each breath controlled. They were on the hunt. Yet it felt as though they were the ones being hunted, and every shadow seemed to follow them with eyes unseen. The river beside them whispered softly under the moonlight, its dark waters masking whatever secrets lay beneath its surface. They had been tracking her for days, the sniper who had left behind. A trail of bodies and unanswered questions. A phantom who had appeared and vanished with the efficiency of a ghost, and the audacity of someone who knew no one could truly catch her. Some of the men doubted she even existed. But the evidence was undeniable. Their comrades had fallen one by one, each kill precise, and each shot untraceable, until whispers among the team grew louder despite the command for silence, and the same question repeated itself again and again. Where is she hiding? Point Man raised his fist, and the squad froze. The jungle offered nothing but a stillness that clawed at their nerves. The team leader scanned the tree line. His instincts gnawed at him, telling him the answer was not up there, that it was not the cliffs or the canopy or the ridges. She had chosen a different place, a place no one expected because she was not just another sniper. She was something else altogether. He turned his head slowly to the river, and in his chest the dread of realization began to grow. The river seemed calm under the fading moon, yet the men knew calm often masked death currents that could drag a man under without a scream. Branches that broke silently against hidden rocks, predators lurking with patience that surpassed human thought. And now there was her somewhere near, if not within the same current. They were brushing past with careless glances. One of the younger SEALs shifted uncomfortably, his boots sinking slightly into the mud, and he whispered too softly, for any ears but the closest to hear, "What if she is right there watching?" The leader hushed him, but the words spread among their thoughts like wildfire as each of them felt the creeping sensation that eyes were already on them. Unseen eyes, patient, eyes steady as a scope. Their hands tightened around their rifles, their hearts quickened, but not one of them dared make a sudden move. They were trained for this, to stay calm, to breathe through fear, but even training wavered when facing the unknown. And this enemy was more unknown than any they had faced before. A sound carried over the river, a faint ripple against the surface, the kind that might come from a fish or drifting log, yet the timing was too perfect, too deliberate, and every head turned slowly toward the dark water where the moonlight reflected off tiny moving ripples. Their formation tensed and weapons angled, but the water stilled again, leaving them with only silence and doubt, a silence that pressed harder than noise could ever manage. And in that silence, the question rose once more in every mind. Where is she hiding? The team advanced with caution. Every boot step weighed against the possibility of giving away their position. The ground squelched faintly with moisture, each sound magnified in their ears as if the forest itself betrayed them. The second man in line caught sight of something glimmering along the bank. But when he blinked, it was gone. The ghost of reflection. Maybe a drop of water, maybe glass, maybe something far worse. He whispered a warning, but it was too vague, too uncertain, and no one dared act without proof. The river shifted again, a stronger ripple this time, as though something large passed beneath its surface, but too slow, too controlled. To be a drifting log, their eyes darted across the current, but nothing emerged. Nothing revealed itself yet. The dread was growing heavier, pressing against them like unseen hands wrapping around their throats. Still, they moved forward because to stop was death and to retreat was worse. And yet the sensation deepened that with every step they took, the hunter was guiding them closer, not away. The jungle air thickened, the shadows felt deeper, and every second seemed stretched into minutes. The men exchanged brief glances, each one calculating each one, remembering the fallen comrades who had no chance to see the shot that took them. Some tightened their grips on their rifles. Others scanned wildly, trying to calm the racing pulse in their necks, and through it all, the leader's eyes stayed locked on the water, because instinct did not lie, and instinct told him that somewhere beneath that calm surface, their enemy lay silent, waiting patient as death itself. A soft rustle came from the far bank, as if something moved low against the foliage, but before anyone could act, the water closer to them broke just slightly. A swirl in the current, so small it could be dismissed, but not tonight, not here, not when they were facing a phantom, who turned ripples into graves. The squad froze. Weapons, trained hearts pounding, breaths controlled, and every man asked the same question in silence. Where is she hiding? And the answer was about to surface in ways they could not yet comprehend. The water stilled again, and the seals held their breath. The jungle pressed in around them, suffocating with silence. The sound of the current became louder in their ears, like a heartbeat echoing through the night. Every man felt it. The sense that they were being drawn into a trap not by accident, but by design. She was out there and she was moving them like pieces on a board. Her patience was legendary and her discipline unshakable. She had been trained to vanish to become the current itself, and they were beginning to understand they were not the hunters tonight. They were the prey. The leader signaled for the men to spread out a wider arc along the bank to cut off escape, but he knew deep inside that escape was not what she intended. She had chosen this battleground, and if she was in the river as he suspected, then every ripple, every shadow, every blade of grass along the bank could hide her rifle, and if she surfaced, it would be too late to react. He could feel the weight of that realization pressing against his chest, and yet retreat was not an option. They had to know who she was. They had to see her with their own eyes. One of the seals crouched low, peering into the water, his night vision catching faint trails of disturbance. On the surface trails that looked too straight, too purposeful to be natural, he raised his hand to signal, but before he could speak, the current shifted again. This time, just a foot from where he crouched, his muscles locked, his finger curled against the trigger. And still, he did not fire because there was nothing to see. Nothing to confirm, only the silent swirl that whispered of her presence, and in that hesitation fear coiled deeper into their guts. Another man on the flank whispered too sharply, his nerves breaking the silence. He swore he saw a figure just below the surface eyes, watching from the dark. But when the others turned, there was nothing. The river looked innocent, black water drifting peacefully under the pale light. Yet there, instinct screamed louder than words. She was there somewhere unseen and waiting. The leader gestured for silence again, but his own pulse was racing faster than he could steady it. He knew they were close, too close, and yet they were blind. The jungle. Air grew heavier, and the moon slipped behind a cloud, dimming the world into deeper shades of black. The men adjusted their scopes, their ears straining for the faintest sound. And then it came a drip of water. Not from the river, but from above, as if something had risen and lowered again somewhere near them. One man swung his weapon around, scanning every shadow along the waterline. But the noise was gone, replaced once more by suffocating silence, and still the question cut through their thoughts, sharper than steel. Where is she hiding? Time dragged, and with each passing second the tension mounted like a rope stretched to breaking point. One of the younger SEALs felt his breath falter, and he clenched his jaw, fighting the panic rising in his throat. He had been trained for combat. He had been tested under fire. But this was different. This was invisible. This was a game where even the act of breathing felt dangerous. He scanned the water until his eyes blurred, and for an instant he thought He saw the shape of a hand pressing against the surface before vanishing into ripples too faint to trust. The squad tightened formation, now weapons aimed low along the water, every movement calculated, every shadow. Suspect the leader signaled again, and they advanced step by cautious step alongside the current. But the deeper they went, the more the dread thickened. It was as though the river itself was alive, conspiring against them. The thought crept into the minds of the men that she was not. Simply hiding in the current, she was part of it, and if that was true, then the river belonged to her, not to them. A sudden splash erupted upstream, a large object breaking the surface with violent force. The men spun around, weapons aimed, sights glowing. In the dark, but all they saw were waves spreading outward and a log drifting lazily in the current. The youngest seal cursed under his breath, certain it was a trick meant to draw them off, but the leader shook his head slowly because his instincts whispered a darker truth. The splash had not been meant to distract, it had been meant to test them, to measure their reaction time, and she now knew how quickly they would move when pressed. The realization chilled them more than the night air, and, though the squad said nothing, each man understood they had just been studied by the very sniper they hunted. She had looked at their formation, tested their reflexes, and melted back into the water, leaving them shaken. The weight of her control pressed down harder, and it became clear they were no longer in pursuit. They were being taught a lesson, and the lesson was that she could strike whenever she chose. The river ahead widened into a dark basin, calm and quiet, yet too quiet. The leader raised his hand, halting the squad. Their eyes scanned the open stretch of water. But nothing moved. Nothing betrayed her position, and yet every instinct screamed that this was the place. This was where she waited, crouched below the surface like a predator ready to rise at the perfect moment. The men fanned out rifles, steady hearts racing, but the calm held and the waiting stretched until even the most disciplined among them felt the bite of doubt, and in that doubt grew the most dangerous thought of all. What if she was already behind them? The air grew heavier as the squad moved deeper into the jungle beside the river, each man feeling the weight of unseen eyes pressing down on them. The night was thick with humidity, and every sound from the forest seemed amplified, leaves rustling, twigs snapping, the distant call of an animal. All of it feeding into the dread that grew heavier. With every passing step, the leader signaled for silence, though. Not a word had been spoken. The silence was more than a command. It was survival. The water beside them stretched into a wide curve, dark and unmoving like a mirror to the sky. The men kept their weapons angled low, watching for ripples, for reflections, for anything that would betray her position. One of the seals whispered too softly for more than two men to hear, asking again. Where is she hiding? His question carried in their minds until it became the only thought left, and still no one had an answer, only the gnawing fear that wherever they looked was not where she would appear. The youngest of the squad scanned the tree line with trembling focus, his scope gliding from branch to branch, but the trees offered nothing, no glint of glass, no shimmer of metal, no shifting shadow that could be called human. His finger tightened around the trigger. But there was no target to justify the squeeze, and he forced himself to loosen it, breathing shallow and slow. Yet the fear did not fade. It grew, stronger each second that passed without contact. The leader crouched low and studied the basin of water ahead. The current slowed here, almost stagnant, the kind of place where danger could rest unseen. He felt the prickling sensation of instincts, warning him that this was not simply terrain. This was a trap carved from nature itself. The surface was too calm, the edges too clean. It looked less like a river bend and more like a stage set for something they could not control. And he knew that. If she was anywhere, she was here. A faint swirl broke the surface to their left, subtle, so subtle it might have been caused by a drifting leaf. Yet no leaf had fallen, nothing disturbed the water above, and yet the swirl widened, circling outward, the SEAL closest to it stiffened his rifle, jerking upward, but he stopped himself from firing. The leader glared at him with eyes that demanded restraint, but inside he knew the man was right. Something had been there. Something still was. Then another. Swirl formed, this one closer, the ripples spreading fast before vanishing into stillness. The squad fanned out rifles aimed into the dark water, breaths caught in their throats. But again the river mocked them with calm. Nothing surfaced. Nothing broke. The silence and the waiting became unbearable. Every second stretched into eternity, and in that eternity, every man imagined her scope aligned on his chest. The squad leader considered ordering a flare, but he knew the risk was too high. The burst of light would blind them as much as it revealed her, and in those seconds she could strike at will. He clenched his jaw, his mind racing with options, yet none seemed right, none offered certainty, and he hated uncertainty. It was a weakness in the field. It was the crack that an enemy like her would exploit, and he knew she already had. A sudden sound broke the silence. Not a splash, not a ripple, but the sharp metallic click of something resetting a sound every man in the squad knew intimately. The sound of a rifle bolt sliding into place. The men froze as one weapon's raised bodies, rigid eyes wide, but there was no target. Only the echo of that sound bouncing through the basin as if the river itself had breathed it out. Each of them knew what it meant. She was ready. She had been ready all along. The SEAL on the flank swore under his breath, his nerves breaking as he swept his scope wildly across the water and the tree line. But the leader snapped his hand up, demanding stillness because they could not afford panic. Not here. Not against her. But the tension was reaching a point where control was slipping like sand through fingers, and every man knew it. They had been trained for combat, trained to face chaos, but this was not chaos. This was silence weaponized. Then the water bulged ahead just slightly as though something massive shifted beneath the surface. A single ripple widened outward, then another, then nothing. The surface smoothed over again too quickly, unnaturally quickly. And the squad understood at once that she was there below them watching, waiting, choosing her moment. They trained their weapons on the spot, holding their breath. But the river betrayed nothing. No silhouette, no sound, no glimmer. Only that eerie calm. That swallowed them whole. The youngest SEAL could not stop himself from whispering again, his voice shaking. Where is she hiding? And the words echoed in their skulls louder than any gunshot, because they all knew the answer was coming soon, and when it came, it would not give them time to breathe, let alone react. The squad stayed locked in place, their weapons trained on the water, but the river gave them nothing back. No sound, no silhouette, no glimmer of metal. The stillness was worse than gunfire, worse than explosions, because it fed the imagination. Each man saw what could be hiding beneath, and each vision was darker than the last. The leader raised his fist, signaling patience, but patience now felt like a noose, tightening around their necks. One of the SEALs on the left flank shifted his stance. He could not shake the sense that something brushed against his boot, though he told himself it was only weeds drifting in the current. Yet when he lifted his foot, the water swirled again, a small circle spreading outward, too precise to be natural. His breath hitched, his finger curled on the trigger, but he froze, his training locking him in place, because firing at nothing was as dangerous as hesitation. Still, the dread clawed at him, whispering that she was directly beneath him. The moon broke through the clouds, spilling pale light across the basin. The reflection rippled faintly, as if disturbed from below. The squad leader scanned the water, every nerve telling him that she was rising, that she was about to surface with the same calm precision she had shown before. But when the light steadied, the surface lay quiet, mocking him again. The calm stretched until sweat slid down the backs of their necks, cold and sharp against the heavy night air. A sudden splash erupted downstream, the sound of something heavy breaking the surface and vanishing again. The squad spun as one rifle snapping toward the disturbance, but all they saw was the water-settling ripples racing outward before, fading into silence, one man swore she is moving downstream. But the leader shook his head slowly. His instincts burned too strong. This was misdirection. She wanted them to chase her into the dark while she circled back unseen. He felt it in his bones, and he trusted that feeling more than any map or order. The team held their ground, scanning both banks, now eyes sharp against the jungle shadows. But the forest betrayed nothing. No shifting leaves, no broken branches, nothing but silence stretching. Longer and longer the weight of it pressed on their chests, until every breath felt dangerous, until the smallest sound of cloth rubbing against gear felt loud enough to give them away. And in that suffocating stillness they understood she was in. Control every second that passed proved it. Then the ripple came not downstream, not behind, but directly in front of them. The water swelled as though a shadow pressed against the surface from below. Slow, deliberate, and certain, the SEALs tensed weapons, ready hearts hammering. But she did not break the surface. Not yet. The bulge flattened and the ripples spread out wide across the basin and faded once more. It was a message she was close enough to touch, and still unseen. The leader gestured, for the squad to spread wider to cover every angle, but he knew the truth angles did not matter when the threat could rise from directly beneath them. He clenched his jaw, scanning the water, his breath shallow, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. He wanted to move forward to force the moment, but instinct screamed to wait to let her reveal herself first. Yet every second of waiting frayed the nerves of his men, and frayed nerves were as deadly as bullets. The jungle shifted suddenly, the sound of branches snapping low to the ground across the river. Every rifle swiveled instantly, scopes locked on the shadowed tree line, but nothing moved. No figure, no flash, no sound after the snap. The squad leader tightened his grip, his gut twisting with the certainty that it was her, a distraction to pull their eyes away from the water, and the instant they looked back, they saw it. The faint outline of a rifle barrel breaking the surface no more than a breath above the current. The SEAL nearest to. It froze, sweat dripping down his temple. His finger trembled on the trigger, but he did not fire because the barrel sank again, disappearing as if it had never been there. The squad leader hissed through clenched teeth, "Hold!" But his eyes burned into the water, knowing that they had just come closer to her than at any point before, and yet they had achieved nothing. She was still unseen, still untouchable. Time dragged, the night grew heavier. The clouds closed over the moon again, drowning the basin. In near total darkness, every sound became sharper, every breath louder. The leader considered pulling them back to higher ground, but he knew retreat would not save them. She would follow. She would rise again. When they were weakest, she had already proven that she chose the ground, and once she chose, she never let go. He could feel that truth sinking into him like the weight of the water itself. Then came the sound that froze them all, the faintest splash, followed by the unmistakable click of a scope. Adjusting it came from the water ahead, no more than 30 feet away. The men raised their rifles ready to unleash fire, but the leader raised his hand sharply, stopping them. He stared into the dark. Water teeth clenched because he knew if she wanted them dead, they already would be, and yet she was waiting, holding the moment, stretching it like wire ready to snap. And when the wire snapped, when she finally rose again, none of them would have time to breathe, let alone act. The squad stood frozen in the black silence of the basin. Their weapons trained on the water, yet none dared to fire. The ripple of movement they had just seen had vanished into calm again, and the jungle around them remained. Eerily still, the leader could feel the tension pressing on his men, the kind of tension that snapped nerves and ended lives. He clenched his jaw, fighting the urge to move forward, fighting the urge to do anything other than wait, but every instinct screamed that waiting was playing her game, and her game always ended in death. The youngest SEAL shifted his stance, unable to shake the image of the rifle barrel breaking the water just moments ago. His eyes darted across the surface, searching for any break, any sign. But the stillness mocked him until his chest felt like it might cave in from the weight of dread. He wanted to whisper to his brothers. He wanted to ask again, "Where is she hiding?" But the words stuck in his throat. And when he finally looked to the squad leader, the only answer he found in the man's eyes was silence. The river carried on slow and indifferent, its surface reflecting the faint starlight above one of the SEALs on the far right flank. Suddenly raised his hand, signaling he had seen something. His scope locked on a faint shimmer in the water, but before he could confirm it was gone, leaving behind nothing but the reflection of the stars. He cursed under his breath, his hands tightening on the rifle grip. But no one fired, because no one wanted to pull the trigger on shadows. They all knew shadows could be fatal distractions. Then the sound returned, a faint drip of water, not from the river, but closer from somewhere along the bank behind them. The squad spun in silence, their boots grinding softly into the mud, rifles snapping up, but the bank was empty. The foliage stirred lightly in the breeze and nothing else. The drip echoed once more, then vanished, leaving them uncertain whether it was real or imagined. The squad leader felt his stomach tighten, because the sniper was not just hiding in the current, she was moving around them, forcing their focus to fracture, and once their focus broke, she would strike. The air grew heavier. The stillness pressed against their lungs like a vice. One SEAL on the left bank leaned forward, peering into the water. He thought he saw eyes below the surface, a faint glimmer watching, but when he blinked, the vision dissolved, leaving him to wonder if his mind was playing tricks on him, or if she was truly that close. His hands trembled against the rifle stock, but he held his fire, waiting, breathing shallow, each second longer than the last. A ripple crossed the center of the basin, wider than before. Deliberate, controlled, every man in the squad locked onto it, their rifles following as the water parted slightly, then stilled again. The leader's breath caught in his throat, because this time he was certain it was her, and yet she did not rise. She lingered below, invisible, untouchable, forcing them to stare into the abyss that threatened to swallow them whole. The men tightened their formation, drawing closer together, but in that closeness they felt exposed, as though her scope was already centered on one of them. Suddenly the jungle erupted with the sound of a branch snapping violently across the riverbank. Every rifle swiveled instantly, scopes scanning the darkness, but the trees stood still, silent, unmoving. The squad leader felt the dread sink deeper into his chest, because he knew this was her tactic. She was pulling them apart with sound, drawing their eyes away from where she truly was. He turned back to the water, his instincts screaming, and as he did, he saw it, a faint shape just breaking the surface no more than 20 feet away. The rifle emerged first, dark and dripping with river water, steady as a spear in the night. Then came the crown of her head, camouflage netting tangled with reeds blending with the current, her movements slow and deliberate. The SEALs froze, caught between instinct and awe. She had been beneath them all along, waiting with the patience of a predator, and now she was rising. Her weapon aimed, her eyes unseen but felt like daggers in the night. The leader's heart thundered in his chest. He raised his hand to signal hold, though his instincts screamed to fire. He knew if she wanted them dead, she would not have risen now. She wanted them to see her, to know she could take them. At any moment, her presence was more terrifying than her bullet, her silence more deadly than a shout. She stood half submerged, the water sliding off her shoulders as she kept her weapon steady, never wavering, never blinking. The squad stared across, the basin, their weapons trained on her, but no man dared squeeze the trigger because something in her calm, something in her control told them it would not matter. She would vanish back into the current before their bullets even struck, and the lesson would remain carved into their minds forever. She was not simply a sniper. She was a phantom one who turned rivers into graves. For a long moment, time itself seemed to freeze the jungle silent, the river holding its breath, the men locked in a deadly stillness with the figure that had haunted them for days, and then with the same slow precision she had shown before she sank back beneath the water, her rifle, the last thing to vanish, the current swallowing her whole until only ripples remained. And even those ripples smoothed out as though she had never been there at all. The squad leader clenched his fists, his breath ragged, his men shaken to their cores. They had faced war. They had faced chaos, but nothing like this. Nothing so quiet. Nothing. So controlled he stared into the still water, knowing she was still there, knowing she had not retreated, only repositioned, and the thought tore at him like a blade, because the truth was clear, she was not done with them, not yet. And when she struck, again, they would not be ready. The squad stood paralyzed, the night folding around them like a closing fist, their nerves shredded from the vision of her rising and sinking again. One man whispered that maybe she was gone, maybe the current had carried her away, but the leader silenced him with a glance because he knew the truth. The kind of predator she was never left her prey unfinished, and now they were the prey caught in her river waiting for the strike they could not see. The jungle rustled, faintly, and every rifle snapped toward the sound, but it was only the wind playing through the leaves mocking them with false alarms. The youngest seal wiped sweat from his brow, his hand trembling as he lowered the scope for a breath. He whispered to himself that it was all in his head, that maybe she would let them go, but the silence that followed weighed heavier than the night itself. Then the water broke again, a ripple smooth, deliberate, not far from the bank where they stood, their rifles turned as one, their eyes locked. But instead of her rifle, it was a small wave rolling forward, carrying branches and reeds as if to shield her movement. The squad leader cursed under his breath because he knew she was using the river itself as her cover, forcing them to guess whether she was behind it or beneath it. The tension shattered with a sudden crack. A shot split the air. One of the seals dropped to his knees, clutching his shoulder, the blood dark against his gear. The squad spun in chaos, firing toward the ripples, but the jungle answered with silence. No splash, no cry, no figure rising from the water, just the still river mocking them again, and the wounded man groaning as his brothers dragged him back from the bank. The leader's chest burned with fury and dread because she had not aimed to kill. She had aimed to wound, to remind them she could choose their fates one by one. Her patience was her weapon, and now it was breaking them apart. He scanned the water through his scope, but saw only darkness, only shifting shadows that seemed to whisper her name. The current swelled again, faint circles spreading outward, as if something massive moved beneath, and the leader knew this was it. The final strike was coming, and they were powerless to stop it. He raised his hand to signal his men steady. But even as he did, a chill ran through him, because the water before him began to part slowly, deliberately. And from that parting surface, something began to rise.